So one of the barriers to educating more people, it is working slowly, but one of the barriers to getting more people to know about ultra-processed food and the enormous benefits to every aspect of health, and because of it helping your gut bacteria, is that the extremely high rate of bad body composition, unhealthy body composition, in several different ways, including high fat, low muscle. There is also bad body composition that also is undiagnosed of not enough muscle and not enough fat and too much muscle. Those are both horribly underdiagnosed and not looked for, and they can be really bad, especially at low weights. At low weights, someone who's like a bodybuilder and gets and takes it too far and ends up, they can actually have really severe complications at a BMI that isn't normally seen as urgent, which is really bad. That they just look at BMI, and what I'm saying is BMI in general is very inappropriate. It massively underdiagnoses people who are overweight and underweight. It causes people to be missed who are, you are actually overweight, but BMI is saying you're not. And I don't understand why this isn't talked about more. And it seems to be like this idea that the people who talk about it, I think it's because the whole big bone thing became a joke and a meme, but that's a real thing. Some people's bones at the same length. You put out two dead corpses, like skeletalized corpses, and you will find if they're the same height and the same sex, some of them will have like the same length of arm. Like that bone will be wider a little bit, not necessarily a lot, but some will be wider than others, even though the bone is the same length. Now I'm at the extreme end. I have extremely narrow bones, and it has meant that most of my life I've been told I was a normal BMI, and yet I jiggled and I wiggled and I was all wibbly wobbly like jelly. And they didn't care. They never did calipers on me. They never did the height to weight ratio. And all the people who want to defend BMI all the time, which they always seem to talk about how, well, but at the extremes, it's accurate. Well, at the extremes, you don't even need it. If it's extreme, you can see that someone's too fat. And if it's extreme, you can see that, you shouldn't see all the vertebrae in someone's back. If it's extreme in either direction, you don't even need any detection. You can just see it, right? So, that's point that if it's inaccurate in the middle, where in the middle is that, well, that's where we actually want it, is where there's a grey area where we're not sure. So BMI only working at the extremes means it's completely useless. Because at the extremes we don't even need it. It's in the middle where anyway. So basically what I want to say is, can we please stop obsessing over at 18.5 you need to stop losing weight. For everybody. That's not true for everybody. And it's not true for everybody that you are overweight when you hit 25. For plenty of people, and yes, I know it can be related to genetic lineage, but even within one race, there's variation. So most people of my genetic lineage, I'm European ancestry, mostly English and Irish. Half of my ancestry I know nothing about. I could be anything, but presumably some kind of European from the look of me, but who knows, because too much information. I have no idea about that side of my family. But basically, I have much narrower bones than most people, and yet so when I go on the NHS website and use their BMI thing, they do ask you your age, your sex. They ask, even though BMI doesn't take into account sex ever usually at all. It's really weird. I don't know if they suddenly are, anyway. But age and your race, and it's okay, first of all, what are mixed race people supposed to do? They haven't actually done the research really, apart from in a few cases they've looked at, Europeans become obese maybe at this weight, and maybe if you're West African descent it may be a little bit higher. They could be a bit bigger by their build is a bit bigger, and Asians, especially Southeast Asians, and I think South Asians as well. I don't know about Southwest Asians, but certainly South and Southeast Asians, generally they will be, they're supposed to be lighter. And however, a lot of these have only done that for the obese category, and they don't change when you become underweight by their BMI standards. So that's stupid. Why not do the research at that end as well? And all the research into when you become underweight, it's actually just lumping everything under 20 together, or everything under 18.5 together, which is ridiculous. You can't compare someone with a BMI of 11 to someone with a BMI of 17.4 And yet that's what they've done, and they've said, well, and in this category, people start getting these complications. And it's like, well, duh, obviously they do. But, like, which BMI is it that they start getting them? You'd need to say, okay, let's look at 17 to 17.5. What are these people's hormones profiles like? Or what are these people's rate of osteoporosis like? What are these people's rate of kidney disease and pancreatitis? All these complications of being underweight. When do they start? Is it 17 to 17.5? And then go, okay, is it 16.5 to 17? Is it this? But they haven't done that in any study. I can't find any study where they've actually broken it down and said at which point do you get these complications. They just lump everyone under 18.5 together and say, well, we know that at some point in there, at some point under 18.5, you start getting an increased rate of these complications. But they haven't bothered to tell you when. And I actually very much suspect that if they did, it would make no difference. Because as I've said, different people need to be at different weights, depending on their skeleton, primarily, how wide their skeleton is, and how long their torso is in ratio to their leg length, how wide their hips are. All these things determine, like, how much of you is torso, how long and wide is your torso, and you've got to fill that in with something, right? You've got to have enough fat to support all the organs, and if you've got a bigger torso, you will have bigger internal organs, and you will start to waste those organs away at a lower weight than someone else, at a higher weight than someone else who doesn't have such a wide torso. So even at the same height, someone can be a lower BMI than you, and unfortunately that will always mean that they get priority in any kind of treatment that is aimed at why are you underweight, we need to find out why, or we know why you're underweight and we need to treat you. They get priority just based on BMI alone. They never actually, they might take into account blood work and complications, but when it's coming to like your body composition and stuff, they never even think to do that, and they really should, because different people at the same height have like different, like, they're sort of essential tissues, like their organs, their organ weight, including the brain, all the liver, your stomach, all these organs are different sizes and weights, and your bones are different sizes and weights at exactly the same standing height as somebody else. And therefore, like, your underweight range is like, it's different to even overweight. It's more important to be super accurate, because you're talking about when you lose, like when you get eaten away at those things. And I think there are tons of people who are told they're not underweight when they are. There are tons of people being told they're not overweight when they are overweight, and vice versa. There are people being told that they are overweight when they're not overweight, and it's all a mess, because these thresholds are they haven't been studied actually, it was standard deviations. It was a nice round number. They're like, well, we like saying 18.5 because that comes to like this certain standard deviation that we tend to use across science, and it's like, well, but you didn't base it on empirical, medical, clinical evidence of when complications start. None of it is based on clinical evidence of at what point you get complications from overweight or underweight. Obesity is the only point where there's been some research into trying to find out, okay, what is the actual number where it goes from just overweight, low level risk to much higher risk. So they've done research at that end into when should we call it obesity, and then when should we call it class 2, and when should we call it class 3. They do clinical data on exactly what BMI points actually correlate with those things. But when it comes to healthy weight going into overweight, and healthy weight going into underweight, and then underweight going into moderately underweight, moderately going into severely, they kind of just cut them off kind of randomly as far as I can tell. I can't find research where they've actually done real research. They've just done like they've looked at they know in their experience that like certain weights are when they tend to see someone coming in with certain severe complications of, like, you know, they know that they would say things like a BMI of 11, I think, is generally considered incompatible with life without like medical intervention and stuff like that. But even that, they will admit it varies. You can have people walking around with a BMI where you're like, oh, that's weird, why haven't you collapsed yet? Why aren't your organs failing yet? And it's because, it's BMI is actually not, they don't really know what they're doing, because they don't look at how wide your skeleton is, how big your organs are, and they just assume all of that is the same just because your standing height is the same. It's ridiculous. You might have a longer torso, a wider skeleton, and therefore you've got more to fill in. I've got a tiny, narrow skeleton, and people look at me, and at this point, I became overweight, and when I was 25 BMI, I was round. I was round at a BMI of just 25, and it's like I got high cholesterol and bad triglycerides immediately. The other year, I became overweight according to BMI for the first time, and immediately when I got a blood test, for the first time I had high cholesterol and bad triglycerides. Even though, like, you know, at the age of 34 or something, something like that, I would have been at that point. And then I got finally advised that I needed to change my diet and lifestyle. Finally. But I think I must, in order to have those biomarkers happening, because usually it takes years of being overweight before you get those. Or you're very old and you suddenly get overweight, maybe then. But I was in my 30s and I'd supposedly never been overweight before. No, they were just underdiagnosing it. And it's a real problem. Like if you look up normal weight obesity, skinny fat, people talk about this, right? And then they will also talk out the other side of their mouth and say there's no such thing as big and small bone. But like, if you believe that skinny fat is a thing, that's only a thing because there is such a thing as having unusually small, narrow bones. It doesn't make any sense for you to have a normal BMI and yet be too fat, unless it's because your bones are small. Because if you don't understand how this works, basically, when you have narrow bones, your body is also much less inclined to grow muscle. And when you have a surplus of calories, whether that's because you need them to grow normally or because you're eating too much or whatever it is, in order to grow new tissue, when you have narrow bones, more of it will be fat when you have small bones, and if you have bigger bones, more of it will be muscle, all else being equal. So obviously testosterone has the biggest impact. Testosterone promotes more muscle and less fat growth, but it's bones. If you have narrow bones, it's a lot harder for you to gain muscle, and you'll instead gain fat. And that's what skinny fat is. That's the only way that skinny fat even makes sense, is when that's what's happening. So basically, and I'm at the extreme end of skinny fat. I don't think most skinny fat people are as bad as me. Like, mine is so bad that I genuinely need, and I do not think this is true of most people, because as I say, temple syndrome is very rare. It's probably underdiagnosed, but despite that, I still do think it is probably truly rare, because I've been looking around thinking of anyone I've ever seen or met who has the signs, and the signs do include physical signs, like these tiny hands and a somewhat disproportionately large head, a certain head shape, certain facial features, and sort of weird, like, all various little things. Some things that are fairly common, some are more rare, but the tiny hands and feet. I've never met anyone my height or shorter, or my height. I've never met anyone my height who has the same small hands as me. They only people who are literally like 3 feet tall, 4 feet tall. If you're 3 to 4 feet tall, you might have hands and feet my size. But if you're like just 4'8", 4'9", because I'm 5'1.5", 156 centimeters. If I meet someone who is 5'0" or 5'1.5" like me, they always still have significantly bigger hands and feet every single time. So it's like, like, I'm obviously not normal skeleton wise. My bones are not. I can't be expected to weigh the same as everyone else when I don't have as much bone at the same height as someone else. Like, my fingers stopped growing quicker and my feet are shorter, and everything is narrower as well. So it's like, no, most people aren't like that, so I'm not going to say that most people are as extreme as me, but there is a problem of doctors not diagnosing skinny fat as a medical problem. I've now got medical problems built up, and I think, what about my mental health? If it was bad enough to be affecting my cholesterol, so that as soon as I gained more weight, as soon as I hit 25 BMI, I suddenly get high cholesterol and bad triglycerides, that tells me I was doing bad, and obviously just what I was eating, ultra-processed food. I was obviously doing myself harm all that time, including probably my mental health. I probably was damaging, causing more anxiety and problems like that, because it's all gut bacteria health. And if they had told me that, I would have looked more into this sooner, and I would have, hopefully, I might have even learned about ultra-processed food a bit sooner, although it's kind of a new thing to understand in the way that we do now. It would have been harder back then anyway. It was harder, because I did really get into health to help my brain and stuff, but what I didn't understand was that I was eating too much volume of food. I had no idea that I was eating too much volume of food, because the BMI was coming out saying that I was normal, and you have all these people telling you that if you want to lose weight when you're a normal BMI, that's wrong, and that's a problem, and you're a problem, and you're a shallow bimbo, and all this other stuff. And it's like, that's a whole other subject I want to talk about, like vanity shaming, assuming vanity, and then also having a problem with vanity, and then assuming the reasons for vanity are all the same for everyone. And it's like, that's a big problem for me. But that's another video. So yeah, I wouldn't want to have, can we please stop ignoring the problem of skinny fat, especially when people talk about like when people say things like BMI is rubbish and they are doing it in an unbalanced way where they're implying that everyone who is called fat is actually not too fat. That's an extreme position that's wrong, but the way to correct that is to point out, as people often do, but actually it more often underdiagnoses fat than it overdiagnoses it. That is true. That's what studies have found, is that it's actually, if you're in a fat country, so UK and US both have done studies on this, and it's like anything between 20 and 30% of the normal BMI population actually have unhealthily high fat percentage, meaning like they're skinny fat. And if it's that high among the normal BMI population, then that's a problem if you realise that is a medical problem. I feel like people have dismissed that as like a cosmetic issue, and it's not. I'm living proof of that. I'm living proof that I think I was doing myself harm. Like my psoriasis was worse. All of the benefits I've got since I got down to this current weight, which a lot of people are going to tell me is too thin. No, it's not for me. It's not for me. It might be for most people. Like how narrow I am would be too thin for most people. But for my specific weird-ass body, I've got a weird... I'm not going to show you, it would be indecent, right? But I've got weird proportions about me. My feet, right? I've got the weirdest looking feet you'll ever see. I'm not a normal build. Nothing about me is normal. Like, even my muscles might not be built the same way. Who knows? They haven't done enough research onto this yet. Like, I don't know what my bone density is. I don't know what any of this is. But I know my bones are narrower than other people at the same sort of length, arm and stuff as me, and my hands and my long bones are also just shorter at the same height. So like my arms, my legs, and my hands and my finger bones are all shorter than you would expect for someone my height. That's going to cut down on my basic weight as well. Like the weight I start at is going to be lower because I've got less bone in my hands. They're so tiny. It's like all this stuff. But I need to be narrower than other people to be healthy, and I know because everything got so much better. My psoriasis got better once I actually dropped even more pounds than I had got to. So I got to a point where I was like very much low end of normal, and I'm not going to mention specific numbers. I know people don't like that. I'm just going to say, like, I can't be at the minimum healthy given for Europeans widely, and I can't. I feel so much better. I have more energy, and my skin is even better when I lose those last 5 pounds. And unfortunately, all the doctors seem to care about is BMI. They're not bothering to do the calipers on me, do the waist measurement thing, and all that. And the scan, I need a body scan, and no one has ever done a body scan on me. They just take my weight and height and go with that. And it's like, you haven't even taken into account how short my bones are and taken the weight from those, like missing. I've got essentially inches of missing bone because everything is shorter and narrower than everyone else. So that you should be taking into account that my fingers are smaller when you calculate what my weight should be. Like, I don't have as much bone in various parts of my body as other people do at the same height as me. So it's like, and that's, I'm at the extreme example, but that's why I think it's good for me to talk about it, is because I can show you like how extreme it can get, where some people and some people are going to be in that spectrum somewhere where you are at your healthiest at a lower BMI, and you shouldn't have people shaming you and saying, why do you want to be even thinner? You must be a shallow, vain bimbo. And it's like, first of all, why is vanity bad? Some of the nicest people ever are actually quite vain. Like, I've not seen a correlation in like niceness and vanity either way. You can be a horrible person and not care about your appearance. I didn't used to care about my appearance at all as a kid. At all. I still wanted to be thin because I don't think those things are not the same. I think I didn't care about what I looked like, how I dressed at all, because I only saw high street fashion and it bored me. I just thought high street fashion, nice makeup, beautiful makeup was boring to me. A lot of like alt and goth people have this experience where it's like you grow up like not having any interest in makeup because it's just boring, and then you suddenly have this epiphany of, oh wait, it can be used to be creative in the morning and just have a fun little play, like a canvas. Treat yourself like a canvas to make an interesting thing that you just like looking at, like an art piece on the wall. Not necessarily great art, just like scribbling some fun, creative, playful thing and making yourself look like, making something nice to look at, like, and it's not the same as looking nice for other people at all. There's none of that. You might happily make yourself look in a way most people don't like, and I find in my experience people generally actually give you some respect for that, for being willing to take a risk and look like how other people don't like. And if the ones who don't, great, it's a great filter. It filters those people out of your life. If they're going to like judge you negatively or be mean to you, then like, great, you've just shortcutted, like, oh, I know that person is not someone I'm going to be compatible with personality wise, so or value wise or anything. So yeah, like, I'm not a shallow bimbo because I spent my whole life thinking I would look a lot better if I was thinner. I was right. Like, my body was telling me, I think what you want to look like is mostly genetic. And if it's your genetic lineage, what is healthy for you? I think my brain knew that I had this tiny skeleton. But I mean, I grew up with it, not being able to open jars. I grew up very aware of how fragile I was. Like, if I fell over, I could just feel so much pain and twisting my ankle and everything. Like, I just knew that I was physically fragile. So my brain knew what my actual body composition was, in a sense, and knew that it was too fat. Like, I understood that, and other people didn't necessarily understand that. They weren't living with this body being, like, so weak and fragile and stuff. I knew that my bones were narrow, and other people didn't really take that into account. So I think that's why I knew I needed to be thinner than other people, and it didn't look right when I was the same width. If I was the same width arm as someone else who had the same length arm, I looked worse than them. Like, my body looked weird and wobbly and jelly-like, and I didn't really like it as much. And I wasn't obsessed with it. I just thought that would be nicer if it wasn't so wibbly-wobbly. Other people's arms are nice and firm, like, you know, muscular, firm, not wibbly-wobbly. Mine were wibbly-wobbly. And other people would say, well, you must just be, like, vain and shallow, that you want to be thinner than other people. And it's like, I know, I now understand. Like, it's because my body, like, I am healthier when I'm like a narrower width than other people. Most people need to be a wider width than I do for health reasons, and that is why my brain interpreted it as more attractive. Like, it interpreted my body as needing to be thinner, and it was right, because, like, our bodies we are evolutionarily designed to, like, want to look like, to like what a healthy body looks like, and that differs depending on your build. If you have a different build, then you will need to look different to someone with a different build, and you will find that more attractive. So I find it attractive on myself to be thinner because that is actually healthier for my build. And in the same way, like, haven't you people noticed who want to shame people into not changing their body type in any way, like the fat acceptance people who will go around shaming anyone who wants to lose weight if there's any element of like appearance in it at all. They don't like that. And for me, I liked how I look because I like the way the clothes fit on me. It's like, again, the artsy thing. It's like, I like the way the lines, I like lines to not be sort of so rounded, but it depends. Like, there are some clothes that actually look better on a more rounded body, like lederhosen look good on a plumper gentleman, actually. Like, there are some clothes that actually do look good on a rounder person. Most clothes that I like look better on, like, straight angular lines, like more cartoonish. It's not about looking like a nice beautiful woman, because I'm more of an androgynous person, really. I just want to look artsy. I don't really want to look like a healthy, perfect human being. I find that personally a little bit boring for me. Other people, if it makes you feel happy and comfortable, I don't care how other people dress at all. Like, they do what they want, and I can think you look great in there as well, but it doesn't feel like me to look pretty and nice, because I don't feel like a pretty, nice, delicate, girly person. And I don't feel butch either. I'm like, and kind of androgynous, kind of like David Bowie, where he leaned more masculine, but wasn't as masculine as most men. I'm like that. I lean femme, but I can't be as feminine as most women. I can't wear dresses and skirts. They make me feel so weird. It's just too feminine for me, that shape. I've tried different designs. It's always too feminine for how I feel. It just feels weird on me. And so would dressing like full on like a man. That would also feel too butch for me, because that's not who I am either. So yeah, all this to say, don't let people shame you and make assumptions about why you want to look a certain way. If it is that you want to impress other people, who cares? That's no one else's business. If that is how your brain is wired, we're all just animals. We're all just animals with a collection of different instincts, of different strengths, and manifesting in different ways because of individual differences. We are just biological machines. We're not designed to be wise, perfect creatures. We're designed to we basically are messy creatures. We have these instincts that don't make sense, and a lot of the things that make you happy won't make sense. That's okay. I had to learn this and not judge myself all the time and think, why am I having an emotion that doesn't make sense? Why do I want this and I can't explain why I want this? I have that kind of mind where I'm like, I want to explain and have everything make sense. And I had to learn that I don't have to have everything make sense. Like, when it comes to my own emotions, I want to be self-aware and understand, like, what behaviors I want to choose for practical reasons, but I don't have to, like, justify every emotion, because I'm just a freaking animal. I'm just a biological animal, and most emotions come from a part of the brain you can't even consciously access. It's just primitive instinct, that the yabbery modern part of the brain that just yabbers away and tries to explain everything, that part then tries to spin you a yarn about why you've got that emotion, and it's usually wrong. It's usually just some primitive ancestral reptile brain thing that's happening, including wanting to look nice. That's mostly just reptile brain. It's not that it's not that deep most of the time. I think it's been enough minutes into this that I can swear and I won't get any anyway. So yeah, I think please don't shame people. So my second point that is all related to this is, don't shame people for wanting to look thinner than other people, when a lot of the time it's because their body genuinely needs to be thinner than other people, and like you kind of can see that in your own. You can see that your bones are smaller and that you are skinny fat, unhealthily skinny fat, at the same width as somebody else of your height. Like you might, it's not that you actually want to look thinner for some silly social reason. It's usually that is what genetically inherently looks better to you, because you kind of know what is healthy for you. See what I mean? And yeah, many people want to look nice for different reasons. Sometimes it's I don't want to be picked on, or I want more social status, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Like I want respect, and I think I'll be more respected in society. I don't think there's anything wrong with that if that's your reason. And for some people like me, I just like a couple of different reasons, but I like now that I actually do care. I used to just think I would happily walk around in a bin bag. My family used to joke that I would happily walk around in a bin bag if I was allowed to, as a child and then as a teenager. I was so bored by makeup, nail varnish, because I saw it as something there to make you look nice and like socially acceptable to other people, and that just bored me. But what I really like now is just expressing my just coming up with something that I like the look of, expressing myself, and not taking. I don't even take selfies, except if it's to upload it specifically for social media, or if I really think I look really amazing one day. Most of the time I dress myself up and I won't even go out the house. That's not the point. I dress up for myself, and it's so I'm not like this social climber that fat acceptance want you to be if you have any care about your appearance, as if they are not obsessed with their appearance. Like, they're way more obsessed with their appearance than I ever was. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you.